May I request that we try and get closer, if you can, members of the media. And then we try and settle down. It is that appointed hour in the afternoon. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues, members of the media. We are now convened for our last press briefing for the day today. I'm sure all of you are looking forward to filing home after this, having been detained by the African National Congress since yesterday morning and since early this morning. But hopefully we've made it count for yourselves in terms of feeding the beast, the news, the content. We strive for that. I want to, at this point, introduce you to this last segment of today, which we did advise you about in our media advisory, where we are interacting and are offering a platform for our friends, most of whom are from the not so liberated zones, to share their perspectives and to actually extend their message to the people of South Africa and the people of the continent and the people of the world. We also joined here by our comrades who are from Zimbabwe, who will also engage with us on the work that is underway there in the Institution and Democratic Consolidation Program. And I do wish, with that, without taking any more time, start off by acknowledging the panel. We keep these things as pressers, so we don't do long inputs. They will just provoke you and offer whatever they want to offer, and then what you will then do is enough time for you to have an engagement with the comrades that are here on the panel. I do wish to then acknowledge the Treasurer General of Podemo, our sister party and our sister organization, a sister liberation movement in Eswatini, Comrade Velapi Mamba. You're welcome, Comrade Velapi, representing Podemo. Next to him, to my right, also joined by Comrade Rugete, I hope I'm pronouncing correctly, Rugeje, General Dr. Engelbrecht Rugeje, from ZANU-PF, our sister party in Zimbabwe, who would also give us his own reflections about the state of things in Zimbabwe as well as within the ZANU-PF. We also joined to my left by my sister, the only rose in this panel, Ambassador, Ambassador Hanan Jara, the Palestinian ambassador to South Africa. Next to her is Ambassador Mohammed Besat. I know many people think he is South African, but I do think that he is a global activist for justice, Ambassador, Western Sahara Ambassador to South Africa. And lastly, but not least, we have requested our alliance partner, the South African Communist Party, General Secretary Comrade Solima Paila, who has also had the vantage position of being part of practical efforts at building international solidarity, particularly working class international solidarity, to almost round off the things that are going to be said or reflect on behalf of the alliance as a whole, not just the party, but also COSATU, SANCO, and the African National Congress. My job is to moderate the discussion. I'm not going to be speaking about positions of the ANC. We have platforms for that, but today is to avail a platform for our comrades who are coming from the countries that I've just mentioned. Without any waste of time, I am on the clock, and I'm going to be keeping a bit of running a tightrope to ensure that all of the views can be ventilated. And so please do bear with me in advance, fellow panelists, when I indicate that time is about to be up. With that, I start with yourself, Comrade Velapi Mamba from Podemo. quick reflections on what's happening in Swaziland and any message that you wish to share.
Thank you very much, comrade, and greetings to everyone. I want to start by saying that the current political state of affairs in Swaziland is very concerning. Firstly, because we are a country that is emerging from a massacre that has never been seen before in June 2021, where in the context of COVID-19 and the frustrations of the people in terms of poor service delivery, we saw the unleashing of the security forces on the people by the king, and the killings that have taken place since then have not been accounted for. So nobody has been held accountable for those deaths. And it would appear that there is an intention to erase that massacre from the psyche of the nation and also from the psyche of the region and the international community. But that massacre, the reason I'm starting with it is because it's emblematic of a deep-seated political conundrum and problem that we have in Swaziland, which manifests itself in the existence of a recalcitrant and a very brutal monarch that has refused to modernize over time. So what happened is that when we got our independence in 1968, we ran the country on a constitutional multi-party democratic dispensation. But that was short-lived because it only existed for 5 years. And in 1973, the father to the current king unilaterally abrogated the national constitution, creating virtually a partyless state that is headed by the monarch, assuming all the control over all arms of state, the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive. So in essence, what we have in Swaziland, if we would compare it to Lesotho, for example, which is a constitutional monarch, in Swaziland you have an absolute executive monarch. And some of us actually define it as a royal dictatorship. That is what we have. And one of our biggest problems is that this is a dictatorship that appears to be embraced by the region, by the Southern Africa region. Countries in the SADC are embracing and allowing the existence of a political system called Dingundla, which is the system that was created by the king and the royal family to advance their interests and royal supremacy in the country. So it's a system that is devoid of checks and balances politically, in the sense that Swaziland still is the only country in Africa that bans political parties, bans civil liberties and freedoms, the right to public protest, for example, for unions, for individuals, for civic entities and organizations, is still very much curtailed. Only yesterday, the Minister of Housing announced that he's lifting a moratorium on public protests, but even then he's saying he's lifting it, but still allowing limited a number of people to come out into the streets. But these are really examples of how repressive the political machinery and system is in the country, and the brute force to which the king is willing to go to protect royal interests, protect the domination of the economy by the royal family at the expense of the people of Swaziland. So basically then you have a system where you don't have checks and balances because there are no institutions of public acclamation that people can use to form their own government. ZANU-PF right now is preparing for an election. We don't have an election in Swaziland. What we have is a Mickey Mouse sham process that gives a veneer of democracy when there is actually no substantive democracy. Because democracy should be able to give you a governing party or a government of the people. In our case, we hold elections, but at the end of those elections, you have a government of the king. appointed and imposed by the king on the people. The prime minister is appointed by the king, is never elected, never enjoys public support. So the king decides, and the prime minister can only be a Dlamini, which goes to this whole narrative about you know, the kind of intellectual erasure of other surnames in the country, where intelligence is purportedly only limited to the Dlamini. So this whole notion of the right to lead being drawn from this philosophy of divine appointment and a system where the manufacture of power, of state power and control, centers around the king. So we have created a Frankenstein, basically. And our concerns as Pudemo is the level of latitude and the level of free reign that SADC is giving to this kind of institution. Despite the existence of clear legislative policies in the region about what a democratic election, for example, should look like, it must have political pluralism. There must be political parties. There must be independent candidates. People must be able to then form a government. In our case, we can't do all of that. And so I want to end then by saying that this free reign that has been given to King Mswati III has created the kind of impunity that I described in my opening reflections in this panel, where someone can kill people with impunity and not be held accountable for it by anyone. The SADC, I remember that President Cyril Ramaphosa was actually the head of the SADC Troika organ when this massacre happened. He tried to the best of his ability to try and make sure that the parties come together and try and create some kind of common framework for a genuine political dialogue to end this 50 years of oppression. Because since 1973 to date, it's been 50 years of royal oppression in Swaziland, 50 years of the suffocation of the rights of the Swazi people to express themselves through the ballot box, like any other country in the region. And this is something that we want to come to an end. As Pudemo, we believe that it is now time for Swazis to have a genuine election. It is time for them to have a genuine government. It is time for them to enjoy all the freedoms, the minimum basic freedoms that other citizens of the SADC region and the African continent are enjoying, which are not being enjoyed by the 1.3 million citizens in Swaziland.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my brother, for those reflections. I am hoping that members of the media are taking notes so that when we go to the Q&A, you are ready to engage further. Thank you very much from Pudemo for that. May we then proceed to General Dr. Rugeje. I've got it right this time around. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much for affording me that opportunity. May I begin by making a small correction? During your introduction, you referred to us as semi-liberated. What did you say? Well, my apologies.
That was not said. There is a difference between Western Sahara and Zimbabwe.
Okay.
That was the context.
Okay. Once again, thank you very much for the opportunity for me to share with you what is happening back home. By way of introduction, ZANU-PF is a revolutionary mass party which was involved in the liberation of Zimbabwe through an armed struggle. We have been in power since 1980, and since then we have been able to conduct elections periodically and regularly as dictated by the constitution of the country. I would also want to inform the audience that our elections have also been held under the guidelines of SADC that prescribe that elections have got to be conducted under democratic processes, and that we've been doing. Probably before I come to the issue of the campaign and the election roadmap, I would love to say a few things regarding to the achievements that our Revolutionary Party have made since 1980. We had the First Republic under the leadership of our founding father, Comrade Robert Mugabe, who is now late. And we are now in our Second Republic, where Comrade Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa is the current leader of the Republic and also the head of ZANU-PF as the first secretary and also president. During the Second Republic, we have seen quite a number of achievements being made. Let me start with the issue of poverty eradication. You are aware that we had a successful land reform or agrarian program which we undertook, although there were a lot of criticism in the manner in which we took our land. However, over the years, we've been able to properly utilize the land, and as we speak, Zimbabwe is food secure. We, in the last season, have been able to produce wheat, which will be enough for the consumption of our country. There is no need for Zimbabwe to import any wheat during this season and the season to come. We have also been able to produce enough maize to last until the next season. Whilst we are talking about our agricultural performance, I would also wish to inform the audience that in the area of tobacco production, which is one of our highest foreign currency earning produce, we have done exceptionally well. We have achieved a 49% increase in the production of tobacco. Previously, our projection was 230 million kilograms of tobacco, but because of adequate rains that we received as a country, and again, because of proper agricultural extension services that were provided to the small-scale farmer, we have been able to produce in excess of 287 million, which is a massive increase beyond what we had expected. In the area of infrastructural development, there is a lot that has taken place. For those who travel by road from Johannesburg to Harare, you realize that we have carried out road construction in most parts of the road from Beitbridge right up to Harare, and we expect that construction to be through by the end of the year. We now have got a world standard airport. The Robert Mugabe International Airport has been upgraded. For those who have passed through the international airport within the last week, you should have noticed that we are now using the new airport terminal, which has been upgraded to international standards. And as a result, there are numerous airlines that are arriving. And in the process, that is also impacting very positively on the tourism of the country. I will move on to the issue of mining. We are a country that has an abundant resource of minerals. gold, lithium, chrome, and so forth. But I just want to highlight the issue of lithium because that's the new mineral that we are extracting at the moment. And we've had plants established in 3 of our provinces. We've got one in Mutoko, we've got Bikita lithium, and we've got the Kuiba in the southern part of the country. And these have been extracted, and a lot of the mineral has been exported, and the country has realized adequate foreign currency to take care of our internal needs. Finally, on the successes, I would also want to talk about the issue of health. During the COVID period, we managed to prevent and also administer vaccines to our population. And in terms of statistics, I think we are one country that had the lowest number in comparison to the population of the country that was affected by COVID within the region. And for us, that was really positive. There are quite a number of other issues. I would have wanted also to talk about energy. We have done some mechanical work on our energy generating plant in Wange, units 7 and 8, and Kariba. All those are up and running, and the issue of power generation is tremendously improved, and that again has impacted on our manufacturing. There's been a lot that has gone on in terms of energy provision. We no longer have got dark hours, we no longer have got load shedding, and so forth. So that's about the achievements that were made by the Second Republic. Please, may you allow me to come on to the issue of campaigning or the elections. As the ruling party, we are right in the thick of things at the moment, and we launched our campaign manifesto a month ago, and currently we are involved in campaigning throughout the whole country, beginning with star rallies for the president, rallies for the presidium, rallies for the various levels of our party structures. And what I want to emphasize is that during the launch of our campaign manifesto, His Excellency, the President of the Republic and the first secretary of the party, made it clear, abundantly clear, that this election was going to be free and fair. No violence was going to be tolerated. We expect our supporters and the public and potential voters to maintain order and remain peaceful during the campaign. We have also invited international observers to come and observe our election. We want that to remain transparent as ever. And of course, the African Union and SADC are going to form the core of the observers as usual. With that submission, moderator, I want to submit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, comrade. And I will then move right along in the interest of time, and then move on to my sister next to me from the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the ambassador to South Africa. Over to you. We should use this one.
Thank you, comrades, and thank you for the media for this opportunity also to address you. You asked about the situation currently in Palestine. Unfortunately, Palestine is suffering an apartheid Israeli regime right now, exactly as South Africa used to suffer an apartheid regime 27 years ago. The plight of the Palestinian is not present or is not current. When Israel occupied Palestine in 1948, Israeli militias, they did not only steal the land and steal the resources and destroy our homes and villages. They also uproot us as human beings, as Palestinians from our homeland. More than 750,000 Palestinians were uprooted from Palestine and were scattered in refuge all over the world. Up to this moment, these 750,000 Palestinians had become 7 million Palestinians and still scattered in refuge all over the world with no right to return back to Palestine. That's why we consider the plight of the Palestinian as the biggest plight in modern history. Why? Because nowadays we can witness some wars, but when the war ends and peace prevailed, people can return back to their homes, while our people, 7 million Palestinians, are still denied access to their homeland. This was in the past. The current situation, unfortunately, we still evolve in this vicious cycle. Violence committed by Israeli occupation forces, which tend to become an apartheid regime. And this is not because Palestinians say that it's an apartheid regime. 3 major human rights organizations has characterized the Israeli colonial expansionist regime as an apartheid regime. Amnesty International characterized the Israeli occupation to Palestine as an apartheid state. A major human rights organization, Israeli one called B'Tselem, also characterized the Israeli occupation to Palestine as an apartheid regime because it gives supremacy for the Jewish people over the majority of Palestinians, Muslims, and Christians living there. Also, another human rights watch also characterized the Israeli regime that governs Palestine, Gaza, East Jerusalem, and the state of Israel, also as an apartheid regime. The current situation, you can imagine all what an apartheid regime means. Palestinian communities, different dynamics, are living in small pantostans, suffocating. You need permits to go from one place into another. Mainly, you are not allowed to go to your capital, Jerusalem. Palestinians, Muslims, and Christians are denied going to their holy places, whether in East Jerusalem or in Bethlehem, in big violation for people's right to worship. Lately, the situation has been escalated by the Israeli occupation regime. They have been, since the beginning of this year, they have been raiding Palestinians' cities and villages on daily basis. More than 225 Palestinians have been killed since the beginning of this year. As we know, the Israeli government now is one of the fascist and most ultra-right-wing governments that have been witnessed in Palestine. Unfortunately, this is all under the eyes of the international community who believe in human rights and who say that they want to defend human rights. Obviously, this is a very double standard position by the international community because obviously human rights can be applied on one people and not on the other. That's why we do believe that international community is obliged to practice one criteria when it comes to supporting human rights, when it comes to end occupations. And we do believe that we can count on our friends like South Africa and people in the South to end the plight of the Palestinian people. I leave the rest for your provocative questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very clear. And we now move on to my brother, Ambassador Baysad, who will speak about the condition of the oppressed people of Western Sahara.
Thank you very much, Comrade Bango. I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you, you journalists, the messengers of truth, who are listening here patiently to all these stories of oppressed people. It's through the media and the free media and dedicated journalists that the truth must go there to the public opinion. I associate myself with and express support to all the brothers and sisters who spoke before me. Many of the people of Swaziland facing the brutality of that dictator who belongs to humanity history of 15th or 14th century, where kings rule land and sky, and pledge solidarity with our Zimbabwean brothers against the illegal embargo, and explain and express my total solidarity with the Palestinian people. In Western Sahara, I try to be short. First, this is a case of decolonization. In the international law, which is United Nations resolutions and the Court of Justice, have ruled that Western Sahara is a decolonization issue in a well-known, its online ruling of The Hague. You can check it on 16th of October 75, that Western Sahara is a decolonization issue, must be solved through the implementation of the right of self-determination and the implementation of Resolution 1514. That's exactly the same resolution of the Security Council of the United Nations, of the General Assembly of the United Nations. Unfortunately, we were invaded by Morocco, who occupied this territory illegally, which is a country member of the African Union. Morocco occupied 80% of our land and all of our sea, and oppress the people, deny their right of association, their right of freedom, their right of expression. We have 185,000 refugees in Algeria, another similar of refugees in Mauritania, which is the neighboring country, and in Canarian Islands for the last 50 years. It's a crisis of human rights, where we have something like 60 political prisoners recognized by Amnesty International and by human rights. Another 25 student activists in Moroccan universities are in jails, in addition to those 180 refugees, which is almost 1/4 of the population of the country have suffered in his own skin the impact of the occupation of Morocco to our land. As we speak, and since October 2020, there is the renewal of hostilities because Morocco have occupied more land and has attacked more liberated territory. So in a legitimate defense, self-defense, we retaliate through resuming the armed struggle. And there is a war of attrition that is going on a daily basis between our army, the Army of Sahara Republic, and the Moroccan army. On the political process, United Nations is there, is in the territory. A mission, its name, United Nations Mission for the Referendum in Western Sahara, MINURSO. And there is a guy, maybe you know him, who is mediating, his name, Staffan de Mistura, who is Italian, Swedish, Maltese diplomat, former minister of Italy, mediating between us. But Morocco is not allowing him to visit the territory, and no one saying anything about him. He said, okay, you come to Rabat, but you are not allowed to visit Western Sahara, which show how Morocco is committed to this United Nations peace process. There is an envoy of the African Union, His Excellency President Joachim Chissano, which again Morocco refused to cooperate with him, refused to give him access to the territory. So he's blocking the United Nations efforts, he's blocking African Union process. He closed down the office of the African Union in Western Sahara, which was there since '91, and expelled them outside. He expelled the political component of MINURSO and left only the military observers. So that's the situation as it is today. It's also a crisis of natural resources. Today, yesterday, was the last day of the European Union-Moroccan agreement on fishery, where European Union have pulled out their vessels, fishing vessels, from the territory of Western Sahara because there is an imminent ruling of the Justice Court of the European Union saying that this fishery agreement between Morocco and European Union that includes the water of Western Sahara is illegal and must be stopped. So vessels left last night at 12 o'clock. The last vessel has left Western Sahara, which is a sort of victory of justice and the victory of the stopping of the plundering of the natural resources of peoples in the world. That's the only good news we can share with you about what happened last night. In contrary, the bad news, yesterday the Prime Minister of Israel, someone called Netanyahu, have issued a statement, sent it to the King of Morocco, who is, by the way, a very good friend of the King of Swaziland, and a good friend of Netanyahu, issued a statement recognizing that Morocco recognized Moroccan claim to our land. He recognized that claim to our land in disregard of the Court of The Hague, in disregard of the African Union position, in total disregard of the United Nations resolution, in total disregard of everything. But this is in exchange that Israel will open a consulate in our occupied territory, probably in Dakhla, and that Morocco will open a consulate probably in Jerusalem, in Al-Quds, East Jerusalem, which will be a major development from an Arab Islamic state to open something in Al-Quds. But this is nothing new. We know, and everyone knows, that these regimes, in addition to apartheid regime of South Africa, were a trio alliance between apartheid South Africa, the Moroccan regime, and Israel. We, on the ground, have captured armament made by apartheid South Africa, Impala ML90, who are some people here who have seen them, and they have captured Israeli armament in the hands of Moroccan army. So this news of yesterday just revealing what we know for centuries that is going on, that there are three of them going to bed, and sometimes they join it by Miswati in that big bed for four of them. So I will not speak long. It's a human rights crisis. It's a natural resources illegal plunder. It's the impasse of the political process, be it African or United Nations. But also, there is a struggle. We are winning the struggle. There is armed struggle. There is a lot of solidarity. There is a lot of support from African country, from Latin American country. There is a lot of progress on the battle of the justice, where courts of Panama in Latin America, Court of South Africa in Qabarha, East London. Yes, East London, where the Court of the African Union have ruled against Morocco, where the Court of European Union have ruled against this justice. So we are there, we are winning, and we'll be victorious. A luta continua e victoria certa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Besat. To then close us out, if you could just move the mic. To then close us out, I will then now hand over to Comrade Solima Paila, General Secretary of the SACP. Thanks.
No, thank you very much, Facilitator. Let me just indicate first that this is it's a terrible story we've been hearing from different countries at the moment, except from Zimbabwe. The crisis in Western Sahara continues, and we in the Alliance remain unequivocal in our support for the self-determination and the inalienable right of the people of Western Sahara to their freedoms. So, Comrade Mohamed Beisat, you can be rest assured of our full support for your freedom. You deserve it. It's a human right. And of course, those tanks that you captured, one of them you donated to MK. MK's first tank didn't come from the Soviet Union, came from Polisario Front, the Sahrawi people. After they captured it from the apartheid regime, and they said to Oliver Tambo, we have captured the tank of your country in wrong hands, used also wrongly in your own country. We want to give it to your liberation fighters. I think the issue, same as in Palestine, the atrocities of this brutal apartheid regime of Israel that continues unabated on a daily basis. We have rejected them collectively in the alliance, unequivocally so, and we remain steadfast that the Israel apartheid regime must just stop these constant attacks on Palestinian territories and the expansion of new settlement in the occupied territory of Palestine. And of course, we remain worried that international instruments, be it the United Nations Security Council or United Nations and its various instruments and other world bodies, have dismally failed to protect the right to life of Palestinian people, as is the case with the right to life of the people of Western Sahara. So, of course, the biggest problem in this regard is that the African leaders themselves, particularly in the context of Western Sahara here in Africa, of course with Palestine as well, is that the plight of our people remained in the decision-making processes of people outside of Africa, Europeans, Americans, and even institutions that we have become part of because we wanted to create an orderly world process. But those institutions have been captured, particularly by the hegemony of the Western countries. For instance, the United Nations itself. The main country that vetoes resolutions, progressive resolutions in the UN Security Council is the United States. So their complicity to the atrocities taking place in these countries, it's immeasurable. And therefore, the African Union and other regional bodies need to take drastic decisions, independent decisions, representing the African people and the people of Palestine in this regard. Again, I think it's important to highlight that the developments in Swaziland are quite worrying. We have a king that has recently killed so many people with no consequence. The relationship between the king of Swaziland with the rest of the African Union member states is not changing, despite the atrocities that he commits against his own people. This brutal regime of Swaziland, I think Comrade Mamba explained in detail, particularly recently, given the fact that since 1973, when the king abrogated all these authorities, legislative, judicial, and executive, into one person, there was never a time when they killed so many people at one go, like they did in the last 2 years. And yet, the regional bodies, the AU, still going to forums with this king. South Africa, particularly, has a huge obligation to the liberation of the people of Swaziland, who not only contributed immensely to the liberation of South Africa itself, giving a hand and limb in that particular process. We have Swazi cadres who died in the liberation struggle for South Africa against apartheid. And therefore, we have an obligation to help for democratization in Swaziland, for freedoms in Swaziland. In other words, we need to elevate the work that President Ramaphosa started when he was the head of the SADC organ on security and politics, to intensify that work and make sure that there's appropriate facilitation for transition to democracy in Swaziland. Recently, the king and his fellows murdered Advocate Thulani Maseko, and they can't be allowed, for instance, to investigate this matter on their own. We need actually an independent international authority to investigate the matter of Advocate Thulani Maseko, who was chairing the multi-stakeholder forum to debate and negotiate the transition to democracy in Swaziland, which the king has since stalled. So this is an area that we'll need to come to and best practically resolve. And I want to wish the comrades in Zimbabwe, Dr. Rijeke and others, great success in convening these democratic elections in Swaziland, in Zimbabwe. But let me also indicate the fact that in Zimbabwe, we have called as the alliance the end of Western sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe. Because South Africa has literally carried the burden of these sanctions as well. And these sanctions have imposed untold misery on the Zimbabwean people as a whole. But we are glad that the comrades are registering progress in Zimbabwe despite these difficulties. And therefore, we hope that these coming elections will be conducted as promised by President Mnangagwa in a free and fair environment where Zimbabweans can express their free will and consolidate democratic dispensation in their country. But overall, Facilitator Comrade Mahlengi, it's just important to indicate that what we lack in the world today is effective leadership of organs of power that are embedded in multilateral institutions. We have too much unilateralism, controlled especially by the European Union and the USA, using their military wing of NATO. They are the only group that has got a military wing, the NATO group, because when the Warsaw Pact destroyed its army with the destruction of the Soviet Union, they did not comply when this was an agreement. They have actually fortified this NATO instrument of oppression, which they are now using to arbitrarily stoke wars, remove leaders they don't like in different countries, and this has to come to an end. That is why this forum of BRICS becomes very important for us in the alliance, that it should actually mark a consolidation of a departure from reliance on colonial countries, and have these BRICS countries plus becoming self-reliant, fully independent, fully sovereign, and interdependent in their trade and economic relations in an environment that is democratic, inclusive, not cohesive, as is the case under the European Union and the USA and through NATO, or even using the instruments of the United Nations, particularly of the Security Council. We believe that these questions that have largely related to the decisions of the Security Council at the moment, the Palestinian question and the Western Sahara question, should easily be resolved. But there's no basis why these questions should drag for too long with the continued atrocities by these respective countries, both Morocco and Israel, that we continue to condemn in South Africa. So these countries, this institution must be reformed. That's why we agree fully with President Ramaphosa about the reform of the United Nations. Africa as a continent cannot stand aloof with over 1 billion population and had no voice in the final decisions affecting its people. And this message has to come out much more clearly. And in this regard, we support all the liberation struggles on the continent. We do not compromise on the right to self-determination and the liberation of peoples in different parts of the continent. And we call for an end to these atrocities by imperialist powers. Thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you very much, GS. With those words to close us out of this conversation, We're now going to have a quick interaction, and I'm going to ask that we try and keep it crisp, and also that so that we can also allow each of our comrades an opportunity to respond or interact. So I'm trying to discourage a situation where we are only discussing Eswatini. Sorry for pick on you, my brother. But a situation where we all have a full appreciation of the current struggles for self-determination that have been ventilated this afternoon. I will start with you, my brother, over here, and then I will go to you next to, is it Mahlangu? Next to Crispin. Let's start here, and then we'll go right along. I see a number of hands, but we'll start here.
Thank you. Good afternoon, guys. Yeah, I'll ask everyone a question, so don't worry. Firstly, to my brother from...
Please introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry. My name is Nkosinathi Shazi. I'm a journalist from Power FM News. From my brother from Eswatini, you're part of IPUDEM, which is the largest opposition party in Eswatini. You speak about the pro-democracy protests, which claim the lives of over 40 people, and the transparency and the legitimacy of elections. So as IPUDEM, which is a few African political parties who were invited to the political parties dialogue, have you guys sought any advice from the ANC just with regards to the struggle in Eswatini and how to continue the liberation movement? Secondly, to my brother from Zimbabwe, last week Friday, Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa passed a patriotic bill. So basically, in a nutshell, this bill is against people speaking badly against Zimbabwe. This bill has faced criticism because it's seen as an infringement on freedom of speech. And this bill comes just a few weeks before the elections. I just wanted to find out your reaction on the bill. Is it a controversial one, or is it needed in Zimbabwe? And then my second question, you guys are heading to the elections in August. You have a strong representation of Zimbabweans here in South Africa. So my question is, what is your message to Zimbabweans staying here in South Africa? Are you encouraging them to go home and vote? To my sister from Palestine, the African National Congress has taken a firm stance on Israel. They've called for the boycotting of Israel, and they've taken a firm stance on that. However, a global dialogue has not been created on how to exactly boycott Israel. Here in South Africa, we have a store called Woolworths, which is sort of affiliated to Israel. You know, just last week, Friday, a South African football team played a friendly against Maccabi Tel Aviv, which is a football team from Israel. So how do we start the dialogue on boycotting Israel? And to my brother from the Western Sahara, you mentioned that Israel has recognized the Western Sahara as Moroccan territory. So my question is with regards to the United Nations. A lot has been said about the United Nations, especially the Security Council. You made a mention that a United Nations mediator was supposed to come and mediate, but he didn't even go to the Western Sahara territory. So do you believe these mediators from the United Nations are transparent, or do you think that they are being controlled by Morocco? And then finally, to SACP, as the alliance, the Russian President Vladimir Putin, by mutual agreement with President Cyril Ramaphosa, will not be attending the BRICS summit. I just wanted to get your reaction on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I do hope that others won't follow your example, Nkosinathi, but thank you for your questions. I have a total of 7 questions. Here we go. All right, shall we then go to Sifiso Mahlangu?
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Sifiso Mahlangu from Independent Media. I have 2 questions from directed to the Zimbabwean representative.
Could we use the mic? So just amplify a bit.
Is this audible?
That's better.
All right. Sifiso Mahlangu, Independent. My one question is directed to the Zimbabwean representative. Sir, you paint such a wonderful picture of Zimbabwe and the development in our neighboring countries, but I don't think that is the case for many of us who study international relations and who cover Zimbabwe every day. unemployment is soaring, porous borders to South Africa. We have the highest concentration of Zimbabweans outside of Zimbabwe, saturated in South Africa. As the election comes, we've got visuals of voters being attacked, being brutalized by the ruling party. But today you sit here and you talk about free and fair elections and development in Zimbabwe. But from the purview of us, the media, that is not what is happening in Zimbabwe. When we speak to our counterparts who are journalists in Zimbabwe, they speak about how they are brutalized by ZANU-PF, how they are jailed by the ruling party, how there's no transparency in the media. And I think it's kind of disingenuous to sit here at an ANC dialogue and say, well, things are working just fine in Zimbabwe because we're the fourth estate. And I don't think that's the reality. Maybe you can answer that. And to the ambassador from Palestine, have you considered, in Nasrec 2017, the ANC took up a policy to downgrade the embassy, the South African embassy in Israel. Of course, that hasn't happened. I don't know if you've done some maths into the ANC and considered that the ANC, first of all, from 1991, has been funded by the Jews. The same Jews that they oppose in your presence and stand up for Palestine. Is there a consideration from Palestine that the ANC might speak right and act left? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiso. Shall I then look out for, I think, for the citizen over there? Yes.
Yeah. My name is Eric Naki from the Citizen newspaper. The question that I was going to ask Zimbabwe has been asked already by my colleague, Mahlangu, because I was concerned about the fact that opposition parties are not allowed to campaign freely. One of them have their billboards defaced and torn down, and they have to ask for permission to put up billboards. They must ask permission from the government, even for the content of the billboards. Those were the issues that we wanted ZANU-PF to answer to. But regarding the Western Sahara, I would like to know, what is your view regarding the autonomy plan for Western Sahara as proposed by Morocco? Because Morocco proposed that to say Western Sahara will have its own constitution, it has have its own government, its own courts, its own parliament, and all that, all those things. So it sounds like a beautiful proposal. What is your view with that? What do you think about it? Because from the way they paint it like it's a good thing. And it's only you guys that don't want it. Yes.
And the piece is your own thoughts about that.
I am protecting you from the ambassador, Eric. No, I'm sure you'll speak comprehensively about that. Can I, Tando?
Good day. My name is Tando Maeko from the Business Day. To the representative from the PLO, what do you make of the fact that the International Criminal Court has not made any tangible effort against Israel in its conflict with Palestine? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next to you.
Turkmen Terzi, Turkish Minute. I want to direct my question to SG Mapaila. Yesterday I also asked the Turkish AKP is here. So this question is maybe not relevant to South Africa, but in terms of international, you know, the seriousness of this question. Because the Kurdish parties I didn't see here, socialist parties, they are not here, Turkish socialist parties. HDP, the Kurdish party, the Selahattin Demirtas was in ANC headquarters, so he has been jailed for many years. He's not here, but the ANC, the AKP is here. So how come the ANC and the AKP come together? Because we know, we used to write about the story about Nelson Mandela, who rejected the Atatürk Peace Award. So that's why Turkish government is seriously very angry about the Nelson Mandela and the ANC. So today we see AKP and ANC together. That's very interesting. Here, please explain that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I turn to, ideally needed a full set of hands, but I'm willing to revisit that thought once the first round has been responded to. Kaya?
Thank you so much. Peter Molemani, Kaya News. Terrible stories indeed, eh? Too horrific for words. I will take off my journalism hat and put on a hat whereby I become a resident of one of the countries affected. Mr. Mapaila, to you, I don't even know where to start. I'm even scared to go and visit one of these countries. Condemning them, Mr. Mapaila, is not enough. Words cannot help. They are here in the country. Most of them have shared that how South Africa was helped to fight apartheid. They are here to ask for help, action. What action can we expect from SACP together with South Africa in making sure that the countries get assistance? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pitso. Thank you very much. May I, at this point, turn to our panelists for very brief reflections, because I'd like to take a second round, just so that we can really make effective use of this interaction, and we can reach South Africans, Africans, and the world far and wide. And so I think the more we have an interaction, the better. I'll start with yourself, my brother, Comrade Mamba.
Thank you, Comrade Mahleng. Thank you very much, Nkosinathi, for the question. Let me first say that indeed Pudemo is the largest liberation movement working with other liberation or entities in Swaziland. And we take pride in our history as a party that has been consistent in not only correctly analyzing and categorizing the dictatorship of the royal family in Swaziland, but also consistently calling for a transition to a proper constitutional multi-party democratic state. And we will accept no less. And the demands that Pudemo articulates and stands for are demands that cannot be wished away. And that is why I was saying, if King Mswati thought that killing us, like is currently happening in the country, taking out guns, arresting our comrades in their numbers, forcing our people into exile, hunting, using mercenaries who unfortunately are from South Africa to hunt and terrorize our people at night, are things that are going to scare us. He must think again. We are not afraid to let the world know that it is time. It is time for change in Swaziland. And that time is irreversible. So to your question about whether we have consulted the ANC here, we have sought advice, I want to make it crystal clear that indeed, that is why me and the president are here. And we're not only seeking advice from the ANC, but from all the other political parties that are here from all over the continent and from all over the global south. And we're not only seeking advice, we're also seeking practical, cogent support to the cause of the Swazi struggle. That will support the suffering of the people of Swaziland to transform their country into a democratic state like all other nation states of the world. Because there is this narrative that Swaziland must be understood in the context of Africanism and the preservation of culture and tradition, which is absolute nonsense. Swaziland is not different from the other countries of the world. We have monarchies all over this continent that are subject to constitutional rule, that are subject to the will and the right of the people. We don't want to have a situation where the tail is wagging the dog, which is happening in Swaziland. The dog must wag the tail. The people of Swaziland are the ones that must decide how to be governed, who must govern them, and to what extent the resources and wealth of the country should be shared. Because the current stratification of the system, the political system under Tingula, has created a failed social contract. Our hospitals are malfunctioning, our education system is collapsing, our road network, especially in rural areas, is dead. On the other side of the spectrum, you have a king who is living in largesse. He's right now preparing to celebrate his 55th birthday. We are reportedly told that he has purchased 20 Maybach Mercedes-Benz. When our people are hungry, when our people are not enjoying free water, one man and his family must hold all of us to ransom. And there are cheerleaders in this region who are allowing that. We are saying this must stop. This must stop, comrades. Countries like South Africa must, from now onwards, play a very decisive role in deploying all the necessary tools at its disposal to make sure that what's happening in Swaziland is corrected. Like I have said, you cannot wish away those voices of Swazis who are clamoring for freedom. If you continue to try to wish them away, you are creating a perpetual problem. The conflict that we saw in 2021 is getting worse because the state thinks that in its repertoire of skills, the best response is to take out guns and start hunting down people and killing them, chasing them out of the country. We have people who are in exile, we have people who are in prison for no reason other than demanding a democratic state. There is absolutely no reason that in the world today there should be one family who believe that they have the divine right to rule over all of us. We're not going to accept that. And as Pudemo, we believe that the people must be mobilized to do whatever is necessary and is needed to free the country from royal oppression. We cannot fight for independence from the British only to be suppressed and subjugated by one family. Our great-great-parents didn't fight for Swazi independence so that the royal family can then oppress us. No, we fought for independence so that we could have a proper state, like all other nation states. So now Swaziland is in a phase where we are fighting for our second independence. And we are appealing to all of you to support us in this fight. Because we are going to fight until we win. It's not a fight that is going to end because some of us have been killed. Like Comrade Soli has already made reference to my friend and Comrade Tulani Masego. By killing him, they thought they would silence us. We will never be silenced. This is a struggle that we will wage until the end. Until we either have a president or a prime minister as demanded by the people of Swaziland and a government that represents the aspirations of our people. Thank you, Comrade.
Thanks very much, Comrade Mamba. Yes, back to you, brother.
Thank you very much. There are a couple of questions that have been posed by our colleagues in the fourth estate. The first one pertains to the patriotic bill, which was ascended to by His Excellency, as you precisely said, last Friday. That is true. In the minds of most Zimbabweans, this is a welcome development, and the bill went through all the necessary processes before the president ascended to it, reflecting that it is a bill that was long wished to be implemented. But you may wish to know the background to the patriotic bill. The issue of sanctions is an issue many observers about our political situation in Zimbabwe choose to ignore. Most of the current political and economic problems that we face as a nation revolve around the issue of sanctions. And the patriotic bill was established on the background of some of our citizens being allowed by foreign countries to influence the enacting of laws that cripple our economy. You remember in 2001, when the President of America, then it was George Bush Jr., who ascended to the act which was described as the Zimbabwe Democratic and Economic Recovery Act, ZIDERA. Initially, they said the sanctions were targeted at individuals, but later on, we realized that it was not only targeting individuals, but it was targeting the entire nation. And the result from the implementation of these sanctions is that we have seen most of our economic organizations failing to perform because of lack of accessing to the lines of credit to access the necessary foreign currency for capital injection into our economic activities. And also as a result, we experienced an exodus of our own people leaving Zimbabwe for what they called greener pastures. Some moving to South Africa, some moving to Great Britain, America, Australia, and so forth. But the patriotic bill which we introduced, it's not something that is unique with our country. If you are a student of history like myself, you recall that in the 1870s, the Americans introduced what they call the Logan Act. The Logan Act was designed to prevent American citizens from criticizing the American institutions, particularly away from America. So it's not something that is unique with us. It's something that even applies to the first world. Right. I move on to the second question, which is the fact that we've got a lot of Zimbabweans resident here, and what is the message that I have for them in order for them to participate in the coming elections. The simple message is, it is their constitutional right to vote and vote for whoever they want, provided they are registered to vote. if they appear in the voters register for this current general election, then they are free to come home and vote. And we would encourage them, wherever possible, that they come back home and participate in the voting, because it is their constitutional right. I move on to the sensitive issue of the harassment of journalists and the issue of brutality, you know, and so forth. I don't want to lie, except probably the issue of one journalist, who has been taken to the police to answer maybe a few questions. But what we have experienced in the country is that there is a tendency by some of your colleagues to write lies. They choose to write lies, avoiding facts. And any country has got laws to stop lies being peddled regarding that country. So, in the event that a journalist writes lies, obviously the law will take its course. I want to give you a classic example. In the 90s, where a journalist wrote a story regarding the death of a soldier in DRC who was then buried in Mutare without a head. And we went to the extent of exhuming the body of that soldier just to prove to the public that no such thing had happened. So imagine the kind of anguish, the kind of trauma it would cause to the family, because somebody has chosen to write a lie so that their publication sells out. So we also need to look at it from that angle, that if you tell the truth, fair and fine. But if you decide to lie, then the law will catch up with you. On the issue of the opposition, I'm not supposed to be speaking on their behalf because I don't belong to the opposition. But suffice to say that there are processes that have got to be followed by any political party in Zimbabwe regarding the current general elections. If you want to hold a political rally, you have got to make an application through the police, and the police have got to vet your application and approve it. And if it is not approved, then the reasons that are advanced by the police, but not by the ruling party. You talked about billboards being destroyed. Well, in the game of politics, it's difficult to substantiate whether the billboard was destroyed by supporters of ZANU-PF or it was destroyed by supporters of the opposition, then alleging that it was done by ZANU-PF. That is a common tactic in politics. An offense is committed and you quickly allege it has been committed by your other colleagues in the opposition or in the ruling party. So it is difficult to justify whether the billboards were really destroyed by ZANU-PF or it was an internal job by the opposition. I submit, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, the comrade from ZANU-PF. And I move on to you, sir.
Thank you. I will start with the question on how to start a dialogue regarding the boycott. First of all, we need to know that we all know that boycott is a catalyst force in bringing any colonization or apartheid regime down, exactly like what happened with South African apartheid regime. But in the case of Palestinian, it's more complicated than the South African apartheid regime, because we are not only backed by one country, we are backed by the international community, excluding some countries, let's say so. Israel is backed up by most of the Western community, US, and even other countries in other continents that are not progressive enough to support the Palestinian cause, or they have their own interests with the state of Israel. That's why this subject is a bit delicate and a bit complicated. Shall I continue? You can hear. And if we are going to talk about boycott, it has different layers, different components, and different audience. Different layers because we are talking about boycott people, normal people, grassroots organizations, NGOs, academia, and dealing with them needs exposing the Palestinian narrative on a just base. Like you need right channels away from mainstream media. Like now we are the situation become better in exposing our narrative because people are more aware about what's going on in Palestine without waffles, no creams, because of the social media platforms that enable people to avoid looking only at the mainstream media. So by this, we increase awareness about people, about communities, about NGOs, and also the academia. Increasing awareness and by exposing the Palestinian narrative leads us to another component, which is the mass mobilization. We need support by our friends to do the mass mobilization against the Israeli apartheid regime. And here we have been dealing with some of the countries like South Africa and some other countries in launching an international campaign to expose Israeli apartheid regime atrocities and practices. And then boycott will come as a later stage. In terms of the other component, which is the most important component, governments, political parties, parliaments, unfortunately this level, which is the most effective level and the influential level and the decision-making level, it needs only political will. And in this regard, we are trying, some European countries, there are some parliaments that has been acknowledging boycott, like the Irish Parliament or the Belgian Parliament, but we're still far away in terms of the governments, because we all know that governments follow their own interests. So this is what I can say about the boycott. We can say that boycott has been the most successful instrument here in South Africa, and we do believe that this comes from the context, the background, the history that South African people has been living in and their experience. And actually we have been requesting South Africa's support in training some of our advocates, some of our lawyers, and some of our activists on ways and mechanisms to establish a Palestinian mechanism for boycott, or to support us in this regard. As for the second question about the ANC's actions and resolutions, I would say that our relationship as PLO with the ANC is not new, or it didn't start only with the 1994 after the democratic transformation. Our relationship as PLO with the ANC is long back since 70s. We share with them a long chapter of friendship and struggle against oppression and aggression. And we totally in full coordination with the ANC when it comes to any resolution that they are going to take. And we highly appreciate the resolution that they took regarding the downgrade of their diplomatic mission. And it really happened because they withdrew their ambassador, and up to this moment there is no ambassador in the South African mission in Tel Aviv. It's a very strong diplomatic sign that we highly appreciate. Only very few countries did this, and this really shows courage and shows dedication and shows support for the Palestinian cause. And by the way, we do believe that the resolution on the downgrade of the South African diplomatic representation to Israel is not only an ANC resolution, because lately, 2 months ago, there has been a resolution that was passed in the South African Parliament in the same context. So this makes it not only an ANC decision or resolution, it is a government resolution that will oblige any South African government now and in the future to take this into consideration. As for the question, what we are expecting from the ICC, first of all, we have to know that ICC is not a procedural body. So we know that we cannot expect any concrete measures or actions from the ICC. We as Palestinians use ICC as one of our legal instruments that offered to us by the international law. And as Palestinians, we are the weakest in terms of the international components now. We do believe that this will build up on our rights for the future. We applied for the ICC and we were accepted recently and after a big fight, because many of the Western countries, pressured by Israel and US, they blocked our membership because they say that Palestine is not a state. Yet, with the support of our friends, we could make it. We applied and we filed many cases. The first case was we got an advisory opinion regarding the Israeli apartheid segregation wall, and they say that the ICC say that it's illegal. But unfortunately, we can't do any measures about it because it's not a procedural body. And then we filed another case, and the ICC decided to send an investigation body to the Palestinian lands to investigate the Israeli war crimes, especially after the war in Gaza. And of course, Israel would not allow such body to come inside to investigate. We do believe that we are not expecting any measures to be taken by ICC, but this is the window that opened for us by international law, and as Palestinians, we are going to use any mechanism, any instrument that offered to us by the international community. And by the way, we all know that the only mechanism that can provide procedures or concrete measures is the UN Security Council resolutions under Article 7, and we all know who controls this.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I will now second last response from Ambassador Pesa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will start with Eric Naki before the other one. I want to thank him because he asked me, despite that he wrote 3 times about this Moroccan proposal without bothering to ask me, as he's supposed to do in terms of professional journalism. Because this proposal of autonomy is presented to us, not to Morocco, not to Eric Naki, but to the Sahrawi people, and it's up to the Sahrawi people to accept it or to refuse it. While you wrote 3 times about it, praising it without even consulting if it is good for me or not, or my people. I did a comparison between the Moroccan proposal of autonomy and the apartheid proposal of Bantustan. And by far, the proposal of Bantustan was more important, more democratic, better, far better than the proposal of Moroccan autonomy. For example, the Bantustan of apartheid have a defense force for the Bantustans, while the Moroccan Bantustan doesn't have defense force. The Bantustans have national courts, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Moroccan Bantustans doesn't have that. So you can imagine that Peter Bota and Vervoud and all of those are better democrats than the King of Morocco. They have better understanding of international law than the Kingdom of Morocco. And I leave it at there. But if it is good or bad, it should be presented to a referendum. It's not enough that the Morocco good say that the Moroccan Bantustan is good to be accepted, or that Eric Nak, you're right, that it is good to be implemented. Whatever it's good or bad, it must be presented to a democratic vote by the people of Western Sahara to accept it or to reject it. Because in the international law, the decolonization issue are governed by Resolution 1415 that say decolonization must be through liberation. Then the colonial powers proposed Resolution 1541, which you know the decolonization can be done by total liberation or integration in an existing country. There is no third way. There is no autonomy. This is a new invention of our friends, the Moroccans, but still it must be subjected to a democratic, legal referendum sponsored by United Nations, where the Sahrawi people choose freely and democratically if it is good or if it's bad. And not if citizens said it's good or if citizens said it's good, bad, or anyone else, not Eric Naki or citizen. So that's about the Moroccan Bantustan proposal. About the Power FM, the distinguished journalist from Power FM. Mediators are mediators. We knew Baker, then after James Baker, who really worked hard and was very, very hard-working to find a solution. And he succeeded that we and Moroccan government signed Houston agreements in 1997. And we set the date for the referendum, which was supposed to be in 99. Then after him came De Soto, a guy from Peru, then Valson from Netherlands, then Christopher Ross, who stayed many years without doing any progress. Then President Kohler from Germany, who was a distinguished man, and now he's the Mistura. All of them, when they resigned, they said Morocco didn't allow them to work. Their speeches are there online. Baker, there is online interview with him with CBS in America. Valsom wrote an article in El País that you can check. De Soto kept quiet. Ross wrote 2 letters, very are on record, you can check them. And Kohler didn't speak yet, but he will speak, and he wrote it to the Secretary General, and we have what he wrote to the Secretary General. Morocco refused to cooperate with all the mediators, refused to allow Mistura. Now didn't visit Western Sahara till now. It's now 3 years he is representative. He was not allowed to visit. Mediators are mediators. Some of them are honorable and honest. Some people are sensible to corruption. Morocco is on record. All the courts have condemned him as using criminally, bribing European parliamentarians, or bribing French journalists, Spanish journalists, and spying on them. And there are courts in the case. I'm not speaking free. You know, there is a resolution by European Parliament condemning Morocco after establishing a criminal organization to bribe MPs. And now there are 6 MPs in jail. I can name Panzeri from Italy, Cayley from Greece. I can name another one from Belgium. 6 European journalists are in jail because they were bribed by Morocco. Some journalists in France lost their job, like Mbarki, lost their job because they were bribed by Morocco. Morocco gave money. And he's bribing everyone, everywhere, because he has no justice, because justice is not in his side, because he's violating human rights. He's resort to spying through Pegasus and through bribing, through money and kickbacks. And those who spoke about freedom of journalists, I advise you all to check Rapporteurs Sans Frontières website, where there are many Moroccan journalists in jail. I can name Omar Al-Radi, Tawfiq Bouachrin, Rida Ben Shamsi, Ali Al-Mrabط, Kanz Al-Alami, Boubacar Al-Jam'i, Suleiman Al-Rasoni, Ali Nuzla, Hajar Al-Raisoni, Hanan Bakour, to name but few. I can also refer you to the report of Human Rights Watch and to Amnesty International, where there are hundreds of political prisoners, not only from Sahrawis, from Moroccans. So those who think Morocco can produce a democratic proposal, they better think again and check their facts from neutral, credible resources, not from the Embassy of Morocco. I thank you.
Thanks very much, Comrade Bisat. I see the GS of the SACP is laughing. It must have been that spirited agitation. Okay, please close us out, Comrade Soli.
No, thank you very much. Firstly, I agree with Comrade, both the last two speakers in their interventions as well as the previous speakers. In particular, I just want to highlight that I was in Western Sahara liberated zones this year in January. I've seen it myself, the aggression recently of Morocco, the expansion into liberated zones, that is in Western Sahara territories, the living conditions of women and children, the civilians, and the atrocities that they are condemned to by Morocco. I think the Communist Party can firstly, will work with our allies, but the Communist Party can take the decision in this regard. We can assist journalists to go to Western Sahara, and we can assist journalists to go to Palestine. I just hope when you go to these countries as journalists, you will come back. You remember when Golani Gwala was one of our outstanding journalists in this country. Forgetting the other friend of his, it was a group of about 4 of them. We went with them to Palestine. And when they came back, 3 of them decided to go back to work in different places as journalists. One was a cameraman who also worked for SABC in Palestine. Because as a journalist, I think, Msiman, sometimes as a journalist you become a human being, not just a descriptor of what's happening. They became like that. But we are prepared to take you to these different areas. We are also prepared to smuggle you into Swaziland, if you like. So that you can go and see it for yourself, the atrocities the people are living under in these countries. I think we have the president of Pudemo here in amongst us, Comrade Mlungisi, who came here quite young. This one responds to Msiman. Together with his comrades, they were student activists. They were chased by King Muswati, who wanted them dead or alive, after they spoke at the SASCO Congress. And he said, that delegation, I want it here, dead or alive. And the Communist Party took a decision that we're not going to donate these comrades back to Swaziland. We actually took them to school mid-year. We went to buy them clothes to complete their high school. He was taken to school to complete his high school by the Communist Party, together with his other comrades. Because we had to take action there and then, the same as we'll take other actions in different areas as it happens. But I think collectively what we can do, first on Swaziland, as to respond to the question by Msimani there, is that South African government need to create a solidarity fund to fund the cause of liberation in other countries. We benefited from this from different countries where we had South Africans from all walks of life, different parties, in exile because of the unbearable conditions here during the apartheid regime. And they were supported by respective countries. They were given bursaries to go and study. They were given places to stay, and many other interventions that were made. We are not doing it at the moment with comrades from Swaziland, for instance. There's still some of them do not even have proper documents. We have Swazi exiles here, some who came at the time that Comrade Mlungisi came, and have never been home. Some have lost their relatives and parents just here, and they can't even go home to bury their loved ones. The South African government, because of its complicity in its regulations, have not heard even the voice of the ANC in this regard. We had Comrade Ams Mbezi, who was arrested in Swaziland, a South African citizen. The 2017 conference of the ANC passed a resolution on him. King Mswati released him 3 weeks before he died, when they could no longer take care of him. We used to take care of him from here, working together for our comrades in Swaziland. So we are dealing with extremely atrocious regimes. So in other words, all South Africans are asked to contribute to the success of liberation struggles everywhere in the world. Turkmen has raised this issue about the Kurdish parties not present here. Yes, I certainly, I'm speaking here on behalf of the alliance, and therefore I'm not speaking completely representing the totality of the alliance. We're in a joint team under the leadership of the ANC organizing this event. It's an ANC organized event. Largely, they focused on parties that can contribute in the context of current power relations within the framework of what BRICS needs to achieve. But it doesn't mean that we couldn't invite our comrades. For instance, we had our comrades from Western Sahara who are here. There may be others who may feel that they should not have been here, but we feel that they should be here. They are our comrades. Their struggle and ours is one. The same as the Kurdish people. The Kurdish struggle is too important for us, particularly as the Communist Party. Let me be clear on as the Communist Party, because I don't think collectively the ANC has got a clear position on this. We have always fought, of course, maybe it's not completely true, it's on the basis of what I said about the ANC's position on Kurdistan, on the basis of how they are implementing it. In fact, their resolutions are not so good enough on this question. But if you look at the positions taken by government, the Turkish government, together working with the CIA, as well as Israeli intelligence, abducted Abdullah Öcalan from Kenya when he was supposed to come here to South Africa in 1996, invited by President Nelson Mandela to take asylum here, as President Mandela was preparing to engage in peaceful negotiations with the various governments regarding the Kurdish question. They hijacked a plane. It's not talked about. Abdullah Öcalan was put in a prison, island prison, guarded by 1,000 people, 1,000 armed forces, one person, one prisoner in Imrali prison in Turkey. He's still in prison. He's not allowed visitation rights. He can't see his family. Sometimes it's even difficult to see doctors or even his lawyers. Up to today. We need to write about these things. These are questions of fundamental questions of people's rights, of people's liberation. So the exclusion of the Kurdish people in this regard is inexcusable. Of course, like I said, this is a forum specific to the BRICS power relations and what we seek to achieve. It doesn't mean that they can't play a role. There are over 53 million people who are stateless as we speak today. It's a great injustice to the Kurdish people. So the Communist Party stays completely in solidarity with the Kurdish people, and we call for the Turkish government to release unconditionally their leader, who's the leader of the Workers' Party of Kurdistan, Comrade Abdullah Öcalan, from prison, and other leaders, including the leaders in Turkey, who are Kurdish members, who are in Turkish parliament, who belong to different parties in Turkey, who have been arrested for simply speaking their own language. And yet, revolutionary organizations and government continue to be in good terms with countries that can actually suppress people's own language. Well, this is a matter, like I said, Comrade Mahlengi, this section, it's more from the party perspective. But the alliance, certainly, we know that President Mandela had invited Abdullah Öcalan. In fact, the late Ibrahim and myself had spent time with the Kurdish comrades in their liberated zones. I don't know many other South Africans from the liberation movement who have done so, but the two of us who have spent time amongst them, we understood their struggles, and we were tasked to disseminate this information back to our structures, but certainly there's not been great appetite on this question. It's a question that we need to resolve it as liberation organizations. That also talks to Techman about why, for instance, only the ruling party of Turkey is invited here. About the question of the Russian president not attending the BRICS after engagement with President Ramaphosa. Firstly, we appreciate the consideration by the Russian Federation on this difficult situation that South Africa faces in the context of being at the crosshairs of imperialism, that they simply want to disseminate us, completely finish us off. And the action that the Russian comrades, particularly President Putin, have taken, have demonstrated understanding and the highest level of statesmanship. Certainly we all know, no single country in this country can think that they can arrest President Putin if he does arrive in their own country, like in this case. None. It's not just a question of semantic. Russia, it's a big world power. In fact, as it is said, unless the US can demonstrate this capacity itself, it may still have more nuclear warheads than Russia, but Russia has more warheads, no less than 40,000 nuclear warheads. Who can touch such a country? So, from a military, intellectual development, scientific development, they are at the same level as the US. The US, of course, is ganging up with its European partners in order to weaken Russia, so that at a point when Russia is extremely weak, they can come in. But what we need to say, of course, is the fact that South Africa must use this lesson of President Putin not able to attend the BRICS summit on behalf of his own country, as the leader of his own country, to reflect on its own instruments of development. For instance, what could have been the reason why we didn't allow President Putin to come? I will speculate because I've not even had a briefing from the president about this matter. But just from a general speculation, in fact, I've not said it in public, but I did know that essentially South Africa was going to give in at a particular point in time. And I'm glad that this was announced by President Putin rather than South Africa itself. Because firstly, we don't have public banking system in this country. Not a single bank owned by the state that we can go and open a bank account and transact and so forth. We have all private commercial banking system controlled by two major instruments of Visa, which is controlled by the European countries, and MasterCard, which is controlled by the US. And all of these are using the world's financial and telecommunication system called the SWIFT system. So imagine if South Africa were to insist, or if Putin were to insist to come here, which we could not have stopped him or even had the capacity to arrest him. We don't have. Do you think we can just go blindly to declare war on Russia? I mean, it's crazy. I mean, not even a single, the capacity, military capacity that we have, just from a perspective of defense, can constitute just as the forces at the Lugansk region now in war with Ukraine for this country. I mean, really, let's be serious, particularly as journalists, to go deeper and understand what's the real power relations that we're dealing with. So we're not going to do anything in this regard. But the point is we're going to suffer more. The Europeans today who are pulling more sanctions, we've got ministers sitting every day to plan sanctions against countries that they do not agree with, Venezuela, Cuba, Russia, China, and so forth. We're going to impose financial sanctions on us. Tomorrow, you're not going to transact all of us here in South Africa because they were just going to tell these banks, you can't use our system. That's the problem. That's why the Communist Party has been calling for the transformation of the financial sector in this country, the creation of public banking system across the board, including people's banking system, cooperative banks, and so forth and so forth. But at the moment, it is not possible. So, whilst one decry the decision by President Putin not to come,
we also appreciate that his consideration was of high statesmanship. It was not an act of cowardice. We do know that they are not even at the same level with those European countries. Russia, if it wants, it can finish them off. But we don't want that catastrophe to actually even reach that particular level, despite their provocations that they're doing on Russia at the moment. So we appreciate this as long as Russia or the Russian Federation will participate in this press conference. But what is important, and I think is the point that the media will need to reflect, need to know, President Putin today has become the most important leader for a multipolar world system. He represents that. The West are trying to divert this vision so that we only see a man who's obsessed with power, an atrocious man. The European parties, they've even blocked the Russian television. They are arresting Russian television journalists in different parts of the world. They are expelling them from different countries. Journalists. I've never heard most of our institutions here condemning that. We need to condemn that as much as we need to condemn this journalist that Comrade Mohammed was talking about, arrested by Morocco. So it is in this particular context that we have to understand what is at stake in the world. We are at the crossroads of a consolidation of a world unipolar system hegemonized by the European Union and the American government with one prescribed path of development, the capitalist system. On the one hand, we have possibility for a multipolar world system with multiple social, economic systems that countries can choose for themselves without being imposed. And at this point, the man at the helm who's at that handle is President Vladimir Putin and the Russian Federation. This is not to take any sides in the context of the war. As the liberation movement here, we have called for peace. We are a peace movement. We have called for peace. We suffer too much. Our leaders have spoken at length about this particular question. On this question of, in other words, let me also conclude this question about Swaziland, that we'll propose that South Africa perhaps can create a proper climate to convene the democratic process in Swaziland here, to fund it. We have funded others, the DRC one and others. We need to fund that so that all role players can participate freely without being subjected to the authority of King Mswati, who withdraws as and when he wants. So they can do that. But also to make sure that we create this solidarity fund. This question about the ANC being funded by Jews, I think this is quite disingenuous. All parties here receive money. Where's the money in the world today? Finance capital in the world today is in the hands of the Jews, worldwide. Whether you go to New York, to London, to Paris, everywhere, is Jewish capital, if you like. If you are to attach, we don't like to attach a capital to a name, because capital should have no color, essentially. But if you were to go to the detail, it's Jewish money all over the world. It funds all parties, all institutions, essentially. Not that, therefore, this money comes literally as Jewish money. It comes in different forms. But the point is that Jews have ascended to the high echelons in the field of corporations and control of finance institutions in the world. We all know that. So tell me of any single party in this country that cannot trace any money that comes from a Jewish person. But also, this is not about a castigation of the Jews. And I don't think you should go into that particular level in order to find the ANC guilty. The ANC receives money like all other political organizations. They fundraise, we fundraise. We have membership donations. The ANC also receives money from political fund, which is insufficient in this country to cover the project of democracy. So it is in this context that I think that this question, I find it disingenuous because it creates an impression that our solidarity with Palestine is not genuine. Our solidarity with Palestine is unbreakable as the liberation movement in this country. These are our comrades. We shed blood in trenches, and our spirit lives side by side. We will die together. They may be dying in a different terrain in Palestine, but we are here the same as the comrades in Western Sahara, but we are one people, one comrade, one struggle. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I didn't want to stop you, GS, lest I be subjected to May Day situation. That's on a lighter note. I do think that we've had a number of very strong reflections from our panelists. I think they've shared in a very emotive manner about things that we should really should keep us awake at night as South Africans. And through yourselves, members of the media, we hope you also become the disseminators and also provide a critical analysis of the things that were shared this afternoon. There is availability for one-on-one interviews for either this afternoon, this evening, it's already evening, and or tomorrow morning with our comrades that are here. For those that wish to have one-on-one interviews, the team from the ANC's Department of Communications, Information and Publicity will gladly curate those conversations. With that having been said, I wish to thank members of the panel and for your time, and thank you members of the media for your time as well. I hope, I don't know whether it's past the filing time, but this is the end of this conversation. Thank you very much.